Welcome to the show, everyone. This is A Light and Shadow of Coaching in and Beyond Organizations production, a documentary that was made to fund social impact through coaching for women in Kenya, and which has been ICF accredited with 10 CCEUs, and recently has won the Ellen Shoup Coaching for Social Good Honorable Mention Award from Institute of Coaching, a Harvard Medical School affiliate. This is only possible because of how all contributors had faith in the documentary, bringing about change in others' life by creating ripple effects of growth, change and development. We believe that not everyone may need coaching, but that everyone deserves coaching, and that coaching needs to be democratized to reach less privileged humans in our world too. Today's episode is the fourth installment of conversations with coaches, leaders, educators who either donated to support coach training for women in Kenya, or made an interview contribution to the documentary, or sponsored a social impact initiative, or actually do it all. They all have two things in common. They share their passion for social impact through coaching and love taking a holistic view at coaching from the light and shadow side of our practice. The goal of the series is to give you an intimate peek behind the curtain. What is social impact through coaching for our guests, and why does social impact matter for these coaches, leaders and educators? You take a look at the messy ingredients that go into a successful coaching career that combines both the light and shadow sides of coaching, and how these two sides benefit our coaching practice. I'm your host or hostess, Tünde Erdös, and if you wish to ask questions, make a comment or recommend a guest, I invite you send me an email at podcast@coachingdocu.com. Well, I'm here with Tichelmann, who, technically speaking, produced the documentary, and who I wish to have with me, as he will have insights into the nitty-gritty details of creating coherent stories without which learning won't be possible. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Tünde.
Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It's good to be back. And of course, my guest today is James Cook, joining us from Nestlé and having moved from an internal coach role with an operational business role to an L&D specialist role, responsible for coaching, mentoring, and team development based in the UK. James, you have also made a huge contribution to the documentary in your role as a team member. Welcome.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for coming and making time. James, you have undergone a really amazing development since you started at Nestlé. What do you most appreciate about this journey?
I've been through so much change since I joined this whole journey on the coaching documentary and being part of your team. That was about 18 months ago, I think, and I was doing it, like you say, an operational business role. A very busy role, but my passion was for coaching. And I was on my coaching journey to get my ICF accreditation, trying to fit that in alongside a really busy, challenging job, and seeing the frustrations of trying to do that. So I was busy in work, and then I volunteered to join part of your team with just the energy and the ambition to be part of the social impact and learn from you, be inspired from the whole team. And so that was happening outside of my day job. So I was busy on both fronts. And that journey has just been incredible in a sense of at work, I've got my accreditation with my ICF. I've got EMCC accreditation. I've got loads of hours of coaching and development and putting myself in the right place to move into my new role. So I'm 3 weeks into role now. And it's felt like my feet haven't touched the ground. Now I'm finding I'm doing podcasts and stuff like that. And I'm not a doctor or a professor in coaching, but I've got lots of experience. I've got 25 years working at Nestlé in supply chain and business optimization roles. But I found that moving into coaching, that's where my passion lies. And I found the right place for me. I'm settling in this place now where everything I'm doing energizes me, and it's bringing out the energy. But that parallels then the journey I've been on with you, meeting. I think the journey started with me engaging with some of your contributors, lots of them. I think I sent about 140 emails out to various contributors, ICF chapters, And the first person I spoke to was Magda Mook from the ICF. And I couldn't quite believe this journey I was going on. So now I feel like I've spoken to all these amazing coaches. I've been inspired. I've got my accreditation, my experience, and now I'm in the ideal job for me. And that's all just probably in less than 18 months. So, yeah.
Wow.
Been busy.
What a journey.
What a journey. And that's why I'm pointing it out, because I really feel honored, James, to have you here on this show today. And I do so because there is this deep joy I pick up in you and around you, being and staying engaged with things. You yourself say how much engagement is important to you. What exactly is so important about engagement that seems to inspire you so much?
Yeah. Well, I can remember having the conversation when we first met about, I didn't have an end goal in mind. It was about the journey for me, and it's linked to engagement. And I think the reason why I've gone on this coaching journey was born about 8 or 9 years ago, when I had an experience of a role where I was super engaged in everything I did. It was a hard job, very challenging, but I liked the people I was working with. I liked the challenges I was working on. I was making a difference. I could see why I was making a difference and what we were trying to achieve. And I'd have climbed over any hurdle, any obstacle to achieve more than my goals. So when you talk about SMART goals, I felt they were a bit limiting because they're specific, they're time bound, they're constraining. And I felt engaged enough to do the best I could, which was beyond a SMART goal. And then I moved into a job that I felt there was lots of it was a promotion, and it was a good job, but there was lots of change, and at the time there was lots of politics, and I felt the exact opposite. I felt disengaged. And so from a personal perspective, I reflected, I did some development planning. I tried to look what was it that lit my fire, made me resilient in hard times, and it was working with people. And I think I was doing some coaching with our Nestlé Academy at the time, and I felt that I'd had a hard day, and I did some coaching that probably was a bit too much. I was so busy, and I found myself coaching these people, but I came out of that fully energized and realized that's what drives me. That's where I get my passion from. So I built myself a development plan to get myself to where I am today. And it wasn't a specific job or speaking to you. None of that was on there. It was about the experiences for me and the journey, and how do I get those moments of energy more and more into my career? How do I build those into my job? And I've been through 3 or 4 jobs since then, all incrementally moving in that direction. And now I feel that what motivates me is, because I've had that experience, how can I help others realize their agency in all of this and be able to increase their engagement while they're at work and change their outcomes? And I think that's how coaching can really help.
Well, James, a hearty welcome. Welcome on this show. And I just wanted also still, because it's so beautiful to listen to you, I must tell you honestly, the way you are, the very way you are speaking about how you're staying engaged is so inspiring, and it has been very helpful on my journey to get this documentary where Michael and I, we could get it, because we need there are so many obstacles to, and staying engaged is the only way forward. And if I'm honest, your way of seeing engagement, it really sensitized me to, yes, that's the key to everything here. So thank you for that again. Yeah,
well, it's felt effortless.
Well, it's easy to say that with hindsight, okay?
Yeah, you're right. There was times in there where I was thinking, I've had a really busy day. Why am I speaking to somebody like the head of the ICF when I wasn't even an accredited coach at that point?
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed every moment of it. I think probably more recently, I found it a bit harder because I've been changing jobs, doing 2 jobs, and quite stretched. I found it harder in the evenings. I've been tired. So I think earlier this year when you were in Kenya, I think that was quite good, because I probably didn't have much capacity to support at that point. But then when you contacted me again to do the podcast, it just it energizes me again. So thank you for reaching out to me.
So before we deep dive into the conversation about the documentary and stuff like this and social impact, is there something you yourself would like to add about yourself on top of what I have mentioned and you have already mentioned, something that you deeply wish our audience to be aware of?
That's a good question, because I always say, no, there's nothing really I want to share. But I think the important topic for me, and it's a passion point, I feel so strongly about it, and it relates to coaching, but it's listening. And out of all the skills of a coach, listening is the one that it really interests me, and I feel I feel so strongly about, because, and we might talk about it later when we talk about coaching in organisations and stuff. I think that in today's world, with all the technology, the pace of change, the polarisation of social media, all of that, I feel like people aren't being heard as much as they could be. And I think it's a skill that we really should practice more and have space and time for. So outside of work and outside of my coaching journey, I've done other things outside of all of that to connect with how I listen, how I improve my listening skills. So I think that's like a professional sort of hobby, if you know what I mean. That's really important to me.
Thank you very much. It's really touching. Thank you. Michael, and how about you? Is there something that you deeply wish our audience to be aware of?
About me, I don't think so.
You guys are too modest about yourself.
What I would like to know from our audience is maybe some feedback on what we're doing. So, hey guys, reach out to us, write us an email, get in touch, come on the show.
Okay, so it was not about modesty, it was actually about co-creating, right?
Yeah, I think it's we want to continue our conversation about coaching, and I find it really interesting. The people or our guests are really interesting and so diverse.
To sense like, okay, where they are with what we have been sharing so far.
Yeah, I think as one of the creators of the documentary, it's really interesting to get feedback on the documentary and meet the people who are watching and talk about their life, about their feedback, about what they are doing and what they want to share with us and the world.
Yeah. So may the world hear this, Michael, what you have had to share here. Where I would like to pick up today is what you said, James, you said in our exchange prior to our show about the title, The Light and Shadow of Coaching, which seems to have struck you. It is a great moment to reflect what we mean by that, because we have never addressed this, like, why have I chosen this title, The Light and the Shadow Side of coaching? And we've never addressed what we mean by it and what we do not mean by it, and how come that there seem to be so many interpretations around this. So would you be happy to share like your meaning making around the light and the shadow of coaching?
Yeah, I think I questioned it. Maybe I assumed with light and shadow that it almost meant the positive and the negatives of the coaching world. And in some cases there is that. I think some of the contributors were talking about how coaching can be a positive, but then there's issues. So I'm trying to think of an example now around maybe like the focus that coaches place on accrediting and their credentials. Is that a good or a bad thing? And how we get paid for things, coaching, and again, is that distracting us from the coaching? That's how I saw it originally, and then I reflected, what else could that mean? Because I feel like there's another potential view of it, where when I go back to my journey, when I first wrote that development plan to set myself on this journey, I highlighted some what I called my shining lights, and they were sort of 8 or 9 people across the Nestlé world that I'd identified as the best coaches that Nestlé had globally. I didn't know them. I found out who they were, and I put them, part of my development was to go and speak to them and have an hour-long conversation with each of these people. And they were my shining lights in my plan. And I meant that as inspiration. So I wanted to see the world from their view. And all of those conversations were fantastic. I can remember them to this day, and that was about 8 years ago. And they were almost the light for me, as in driving me on and inspiring me and showing me the way almost. And then I felt, so is shadow bad? And I don't think sometimes the shadow side isn't necessarily bad, because I was thinking, right, so you get the shade from a tree, or on a hot day, you can sit in the shade, and it's refreshing and it's needed sometimes. So both those things sort of I reflected on and realised that maybe it's about what's visible and not visible in coaching, rather than negative and positive. It's how visible is something, and they can both be positive or they can both have negatives. So the shadow could be positive in a sense of some of the sort of, I think I see it in the coaching in organisations. Again, I see it as, we talk about coaching as this great big industry, and we've got amazing coaches, loads of accreditations, business development, all of that side of things. But in the organisation, I see actually we can't afford to go and pay for an executive coach for every single one of our staff. So we create a coaching culture of everyday coaching conversations where not everybody is a qualified coach, but it's unseen because it's not at the top level. But I think that we can create those conversations less visibly, but they all have a benefit to everybody.
Michael, what is your take on this? We have never spoken about this, just taken it for granted. What is, if you think into the title, The Light and Shadow, how would you make sense of it?
I think it's a really interesting take, because the obvious one is, as you described, the light as the good and the shadow as the bad. But I would say, like with music, most of the time you're focused on the music itself, the parts that are the music, but the breaks are also inherent to the music, and sometimes even more important than the music you hear. So really interesting take, and I myself have never thought about it in that way.
So you're likening it to music, and then how breaks are important, and not just the sound. So the silence versus the sound, right?
Yeah, likening it to the light and the shadow.
Oh, so thank you guys for this, because we have never addressed this, and actually the idea is to inspire people to make their own meaning around this, because there's no definition to the light and shadow. And maybe the one thing that matters to me is that there is no polarity that I had in mind to evoke. It was actually, we need everything. We need both and more. And to just be sensitized and actively sensitize ourselves to how we are talking about it, how we are cultivating it. Are we inclusive enough around how we talk about coaching and how we practice it? And just a sensitization. And as James once told me, I think it was last time we met, he said, James, that I'm asking questions, they were answering them. So, sort of thing. Like at one point, I think he said, I'm wondering about myself if I'm a narcissist. And that you never got an answer to it and watching the documentary. And that's the whole point. It's not about giving a specific answer to anything, but to take us to a place and a time where we think beyond the obvious, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And not just coaching is the ultimate thing, the linchpin of human development, but like, is it, and to what extent can it be, and how is society changing? What are the interests of society today, and is coaching serving those interests appropriate and correct? So how relevant are we actually? So those have been my ideas around the light and the shadow. So for anyone that is interested, and thank you very much, James, for chipping in about this.
What was your favorite topic that you shed some light on?
Well, that's a trap question, because I think that I haven't done justice to all that I would have wanted to address. But at one point, we needed to give it a break. Because the more we were delving into the topics the more we discovered, and the more I was listening into the interviews, the more we should be speaking about this, and why don't we address that? But we don't have space for this. Yeah. And while originally we had only one part in mind, we ended up having three. So at one point we needed to make a break. And actually what I would like to say about this is there's no favorite, because I think what hurts a bit is that I would have so much liked to create curiosity around even more ideas, around having more people that I can invite to talk about even more aspects of our profession. That's how I would like to answer this question.
So I can look forward to part 4, 5, and
6. What is your level of engagement in this, huh?
I'm up for it. You are.
Okay, so how about we move into something that your pet peeve, actually, coaching in organizations. Would that be okay for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so basically the documentary is meant to support the democratization of coaching, in that it funds coach training for women in Kenya. So basically for coaching to empower them and be more entrepreneurial in their communities. Now, my question is, where do you see the role of coaching in organizations in the widespread movement of democratizing coaching?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question that I'm just starting to grapple with a little bit around the points I touched on earlier around within an organization, who gets the coaching. At the moment, if you have, I see that senior leaders might get a super expensive external coach, and then we also have our own internal coaching professional pool of coaches where they're accredited to the ICF standards. They're good coaches and they're an internal resource. It's a fantastic resource. And simultaneously, we're creating a coaching culture where leaders use a coaching style with their teams and their employees, but also then the employees and the individuals within the organization are being trained up for everyday coaching conversations. And I think for me, it's quite challenging. It's almost like a pecking order of how senior you are in the organization to what level of coaching you get. And I think the more we can create the culture where that's our default way of communicating, we listen well, we question well, we empower others. That's the world I want to live in. But I think, I guess we've got things like digital coaching coming along, where we've got big organisations that can provide coaches at a cheaper rate than some of the specialist coaches. How do we exploit our own internal coaches more? So I find that our coaching pool are coaching it's a bolt onto their day job, like my previous role. And I feel, how do we create the space for that? And I think what I'm seeing is it's linking a bit to mentoring as well, but we have inclusion and belonging and gender diversity, racial diversity, all of these topics. It's where coaching and mentoring has got a really strong place to help support those communities within our organisation.
Do you think that coaching in an organization has to be guided from the top?
No, not at all. I think I've seen some examples where our academy, so our sort of their graduates or apprentices new into the organisation, they're young, they have a very strong views and understanding of some of the sustainability issues that our world faces, and our leaders can learn a lot from them. And I think so we're seeing some mentoring programs where the younger people are actually doing the coaching and mentoring for more senior people, because they're traditionally more older, they're likely to be older, a long career behind them, and they need to understand these new dynamics that are going on from a younger person's point of view. So I think, no, it doesn't have to be top down, but I think probably where the money's spent is for the senior leaders of the organisation to get the coaches, and whereas the people further down, we can't afford a coach as an external executive coach for every single one of our staff. So we have to try and sort of democratise coaching across the organisation. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think your example really surprised me, because I think what you mostly hear about is top down, so senior people coaching junior people, but in terms of apprentices teaching the old ones. Sounds like a fantastic idea.
And what is the acceptance level for this, James?
We did some trials last year, and that was to the very senior people of the organisation in the UK, and now we're running that scheme again with the next level down of management. So it was very successful.
So I'm just checking in to make sure that I understand that we're on the same page with each other. So the question is like when there is junior coaching, mentoring, senior. So and the acceptance level for that is this what you have alluded to? Is this what are we on the same page about this?
Yeah.
Ah, wow. Well, that makes me to think, because this is a paradigm shift sort of that you are bringing about. What is the biggest challenge that you are facing actually? Because it seems like it really, when I'm listening to this, it seems like installing a coaching culture is a picnic in the park. But I don't like to believe this, but it sounds like this. And so I'm wondering, where do you see the biggest challenges? Or where has your organization faced the biggest challenges, at least from the UK perspective, if you will, when installing a coaching culture?
I think it's the other way. So that initiative of the almost like the reverse mentoring and coaching, that's one example that where we're trying to create a coaching culture where it's more probably leaders to their teams. I think sometimes what I'm seeing the challenge is really that leaders are so busy and stretched. There's lots of change going on that sometimes they need, or that I think they feel like they need a quick answer. They need someone to tell them, I just need to know how to do this and move on and solve the problem. I think they see the value. Everybody sees the value in the coaching and the training, but it sort of goes out the window sometimes when you've got this urgent business problem, and they might turn up to a coaching session really wanting mentoring or telling what the answer is. And I think sometimes you get a frustration that, I'm going to have to come up with this answer and it's going to take time. And I think we can all see the benefit of those individuals owning their solutions and the empowerment and the journey they go on. But I do see things are moving so fast. There's so much change. There's so much pressure that I feel like unless you're like us, where you're really engaged in the coaching profession as a whole and you really, really understand it, I think sometimes it goes out the window. Leaders will find themselves under a lot of pressure, and they will tell or give answers to their teams rather than coaching because it's quicker. Or if they were the one with the challenge, I think they might turn up to a coaching session and almost just want the answer and see that it's quicker if they're just told. And I think that frustrates me sometimes because it might seem quicker, but is it the right answer? It might be the right answer from the person giving the answer. So I think that's a barrier, definitely.
There's also another aspect that's like, while listening to you, what has popped up in my mind is talking to organizations that deploy coaching in a democratized manner on a large scale, who actually start saying things around everybody wants to have a coach-like conversation or show up as if they were coaching each other, but not each topic is coachable. No. Or sometimes you just need to give a straightforward answer or say a yes and a no, rather than, do this dance of questioning and listening and sort of thing. And so it seems that sometimes people also reach a point where coach-like conversations or bringing in coaching skills can just be inappropriate. What is your take on this?
I think sometimes it can, if it's not done well and in the right moments, it can be frustrating for individuals. Because again, you're trying to create a coaching culture where you're having more coaching conversations. But like you say, not every conversation should be a coaching conversation. And I think sometimes people can be maybe fatigued by it. That where you've got in external coaching, you've got a demand and someone's looking for a coach, they're asking for a coach, they've got a specific challenge. Where in an organisation, you're trying to create a culture where they're not necessarily coming to their leader and saying, I want a coaching relationship for the next 6 meetings. How are we going to contract? How are we going to manage that coaching relationship? It's not like that. It's more just a natural, organic relationship where you're using coaching skills. So I think sometimes if the leader gets it wrong, it can be a little bit frustrating, because it almost feels like, it could feel like they're imposing coaching on somebody if they don't necessarily want it. And that's probably just as bad as telling somebody in the wrong circumstances too.
It sounds like you're coining for the first time I'm hearing the term fatigue. So the concept of coaching fatigue. It's a very interesting thing to hear. So it's how do you see, where do you see the role of complexity and scarcity driving the need to find fast answers? You were just saying something around when there's somebody needs a fast answer. So where do you see the role of complexity and scarcity driving the need to find fast answers and find answers fast, challenging the time people and teams in organizations have to reflect and find solutions through coaching?
I think for me, what I've been seeing recently is around time scarcity, and particularly sort of senior leaders and just leaders in general. It feels like with this new world we're in, people are in back-to-back meetings all day long, every day. And I feel like to have a really good coaching conversation, it needs some decompression time beforehand and afterwards, probably, to reflect. It requires time where you're not distracted, both of you, the coach and the coachee. And I feel like that time scarcity at the moment can really impact the quality of, or the opportunity for coaching conversations and the quality of them, because people are tired. They're in Zoom calls back to back, no space to do their actual operational tasks, and they're squeezing them in at the end of the day. And then to have time where you've got a conversation where there's lots of space in it, lots of reflection. It happens, but it's tough to squeeze it in, and it feels like the pace of all of that busyness is getting faster all the time. So I think time scarcity, definitely.
What I'm observing at my day job is that during Corona, Zoom meetings were a good way to have a meeting and everyone learned about them. But it also increased the number of meetings because you don't have to drive somewhere. You can just have a meeting the next day without much planning. And I would say what you're telling, I can see that in our organization too. But additionally, I think we are also finding it hard to recruit new people and bring them up to so time and resource problems. And many of our leaders are mostly sitting in meetings back to back to back, and then we only have the time for like the mandatory yearly meeting to really talk freely about something.
You so right, and resource is going to be my number 2. Scarcity.
Although it's a paradox, isn't it? I mean, if we don't take the time for things, how are we meaning to get results? So it's just a paradox. I'm just sitting with this right now, and I'm wondering, we want to speed up and we want to do things, but then where to, with what end in mind? When we find ourselves depleted and overwhelmed and disconnected, not finding the time to kind of settle and stay grounded, where is this going to get us? Will we get to the results that we are aiming for?
I do feel that quite a lot, that the results sort of seem to take priority. And like you say, then you're spreading yourself across all the meetings and priorities, that actually is it self-destructive in a sense of you're not doing it, all of these tasks as well as you could do. And I think also possibly things like a coaching conversation or a development conversation, both the leader and the individual, I see that they sacrifice those type of conversations first when you're faced with lots of pressing business challenges around hitting targets, or something's happened that we've got to find a new plan for, we've got to react. All of that sort of stuff's going on. And I agree with you that the sort of developmental conversations, coaching conversations, they're what will help you get better results. But it feels like in the short term, they're probably sacrificed first in amongst all of this busyness.
Mm-hmm. And also what I find a bit, I don't know like how I find it, but it doesn't resonate with me very well to say we coaches also need to speed up. We need to speed coach. Now the world is turning faster, so things are, we are getting more and more things on our plate. So we coaches also need to kind of keep up with that speed. How is coaching answering that challenge of speed and time scarcity and complexity if we just do the same thing as the world is doing? No way to balance it, but actually just sucked into the same speediness and time scarcity. Do you have this? Do you see this with the internal coaches, that this is happening in some way in the organization, or where do you think actually that internal coaches can bring the biggest value as opposed to external coaches?
I think, again, I'm still early days in my role, but I see the internal coaching pool we have is such a fantastic resource. They're qualified coaches to the same qualifications as external coaches, and they're not quite a free resource, but people within the organisation can have coaching relationships with these coaches, and it doesn't cost them anything. And generally, these people are doing it because they're energized by coaching. They want to be there. It's part of their development. They'll do it on top of their day jobs. So it's almost not quite a free resource, but it's a flexible, cheaper resource than going externally. I think the challenge is that people within the organisation know when to use them and how to use them well. And that's almost being, as a client or a coachee, having some awareness of what their needs are, and being able to use that resource well. So sometimes it feels like we're possibly not maximising those resources that are available to us. And that's something I want to think about going forward. How do I best make use of this resource that we've got there? And it's being used, and it does make a difference, but how can we use that resource across a wider pool of people that probably wouldn't get coaching normally because it would be cost prohibitive?
There is one thing that I would like to mention. It's kind of a provocative way of addressing it, is I have supervised internal coaches, and so I'm very kind of like, how to say, I'm happy to keep it just a singular experience. So I'm not meaning to say that it's always like this, but I would like to bring up some experiential wisdom from my supervision practice, supervising internal coaches, that they feel like facing challenges when coaching peers, like some sort of conflict of interest. On many levels, like the double roles that they are embodying, being in a functional role and then bringing the coach role, then working with peers who, I mean, also depends on the organizational culture and the political background, but I have come across the internal coaches experience that they are having a harder time to find legitimacy in their role as coaches than external coaches. Would you be happy to share something around that experience, if that's if that's true for Nestlé?
Yeah, well, I've only got experience within Nestlé, and one thing that I think works well for us is just the size of the organisation is so big that, and it's made up of different organisations within the wider organisation. So it is possible to find yourself outside of your normal sphere or your normal community as a coach. So, for example, I've coached people from China, completely different culture, but they're still a Nestlé employee, and nothing to do with my normal function or my normal world. So we are bound by, I guess, the overall fact that we're all Nestlé employees, but that it didn't feel like that was an issue. I think you're right. Sometimes you're part of the pool of, you're part of the problems or the challenges as a coach, because your day job might mean you're part of the same challenge that the person you're coaching might face. Mm. So for me, though, I think one of the benefits of coaching internally is it's more suitable to career and development challenges, I think, because again, as well, it depends how you see mentoring fitting in with coaching. But I think there's definitely space for being able to coach people through their developments and change. But I guess then if you're thinking maybe sort of larger organisational change, if you're a senior leader trying to coach someone and there's lots of organisational change going on, that could be quite problematic. So I think you have to be quite aware of those things and contract carefully.
So what I'm hearing, James, is a scoping. So there is an internal coach will be probably covering fields that are different to those that an external coach would be covering. So this is basically an element of differentiation, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Michael, I would like to ask you: have you got internal coaches deployed in your organization, or is your organization thinking of building, constructing, installing democratizing coaching or setting up a coaching culture?
Yeah, I think, as James has said, it depends. Mentoring is certainly an idea that's quite established. In terms of coaching, I think it's only recently, and as in many organizations, I think it's starting with the top of the organization, and just now they're thinking about developing internal coaches. But I think they're just in the beginning of introducing coaching in the organization. But one thing I'm not sure about is awareness of coaching in organization, because I think in my day job, I think coaching is not really something the employees think about. Only leaders or leaders of teams are aware of coaching or that it might be offered. So I think that's one big question. How can the employees or just the normal base level become aware about coaching and engage with it?
James, is there one particular thought that comes to you to giving advice how to start introducing or what to watch out for when introducing a coaching culture, something valuable that you might like to share?
I don't know about starting it because I didn't start it in Nestlé, so I'm lucky enough to come along, and we had a good coaching culture already. We do have a leadership framework, a leadership behaviour framework where coaching is called out, that we'd expect people across the whole organisation to be able to understand what coaching is and use that in some of their interactions. And then what we do is we have various levels of coaching training available to all employees. So we start off with everyday coaching awareness, and that's just an hour-long session where anybody can come along and find out what coaching is, skills that are required, what's the sort of model, and how you might have a coaching conversation. And that could be for a 5-minute coaching conversation in a lift where somebody's just they've got a challenge or something on their mind. What skills and how could you deal with that conversation, but also putting it in the context of how it fits in with the spectrum of conversations, all the way from a more directive conversation or mentoring or training, and it shows where that fits into all those different conversations. Because like you say, Tünde, that not every conversation should be a coaching conversation. Sometimes there's a need for an urgent, you just need to do it like this and do it now. If I don't know if there's fire regulations or the fire alarm going off, the coaching conversation might not be that helpful. So those courses that we run are really popular.
So like, it sounds like spread the word, make the people acquainted with the concept, like Michael is saying, like how to create awareness, what is coaching at all, bring it to the base level sort of thing, an awareness level to the base level, and then provide training and take it from there, right? What do you think? Like we're coming to a close now, and I'm still having a question around where do you see that digitalization is, or AI is challenging this culture, this coaching culture that your organization has been really taking a lot of time, seems to have put a lot of effort in building. I haven't even asked you what the purpose was in the first place. Why did the organization get interested in doing this? With what purpose in mind? And you feel free to answer that as well. And then where do you see that a digitalization or AI may come in the way or not?
I'm not that well educated on where that AI is going within the coaching world. I do know that I guess we'd be very cautious about data protection and how that would work with AI, where the conversations are, I don't know how private they are, but I guess they're feeding databases and algorithms, and it can be quite personal stuff. So I think that's one element we'd have to be very careful of. Beyond that, I can't really answer it. I've only been enrolled 3 weeks, so I think that will be on the horizon though.
What do you like? It's the last question, then let it go, because I do feel inspired to ask more, but I'll let go of it because I think it's time to wrap up. What is it? What are your aspirations in your new role? What would you like to see happen, or what would you like to have happen in about 5 years' time? What is your aspiration in your new role?
I think for me at the moment, it's continuing that journey. So again, I'll always say this: there's no end point in mind. It's about, for me personally, being more and more engaged in how I can help coach the coaching culture within my organisation. If I'm doing that and working on that, I'll be happy, because that's where I want to be. I think the challenge around how we really maximise the resource of our internal coaching pool, I think that's really important to me. And secondly, I think the direction of how do we link our coaching culture into the team's development side of things. I think that's a really interesting area, because teams in the future, or even now, they're just so important. And how do our leaders or people managers, how do they unleash the power of those teams? And again, not all, when you've got thousands of teams, not all teams can have an external teams coach. So how do we recreate that and create a culture where the leaders develop their teams and create a psychologically safe, trusting environment where their teams can thrive?
Great.
So I think that will be the hot topics over the next few years.
James, good luck with this, and again, congratulations on this amazing journey that you have been on so far, and with your level of engagement that you are bringing to the table, I think you are going to top your expectations. And no, you didn't say you were having expectations. I asked you what aspirations did you have. So I think you will be topping your own aspirations. That's what it sounds to me, at least.
Yeah.
yeah. Say it loudly and proudly, man.
Bring it on. Yeah. No, I went quiet because I was just picturing it all in my head, and it's a nice thought.
Yeah, say it loudly and proudly, because I think you are too modest about your own achievements here. All right, so we are at the top of our time, guys. Let's say goodbye. And before we do so, James, one last thing. Why should anyone be implicated in social impact for coaching?
I've got 2 reasons. One is the actual social impact at the end of the day, that helping others through coaching is, I think it's transformational. And I've been on, not through social impact, but I've been on the receiving end of how coaching can change your journey and your engagement. And if we can help people that wouldn't normally have that, I think we've got to be engaged. Just why wouldn't you? And then secondly, I've just enjoyed the whole journey, all my interactions, the people I've met, the people I've spoken to, and watching the documentaries is just educating me too. So I've got nothing but positives about everything. So I think it's just be part of it and see where it takes you.
Be open for fun, right? It sounds like just
Yeah.
for the fun of it, just do for the fun of it. Yeah, Michael, is there something else that you have wanted to share and we haven't given space for this, or time? We were talking about time scarcity today, but I can give you time to share now before we say goodbye.
I just want to say again that I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that we can keep it going and also keep the social impact going in Kenya. So that's why I said, guys, please get in touch and continue our work.
Thank you, Michael. Great thing, because that gives me an opportunity to add that, guys, if you're interested in getting instant access to the documentary, please go to www.coachingdocu.com. And if you have comments or questions and how you can be part of this initiative, drop us a line at podcast@coachingdocu.com. Now, this is A Light and a Shadow of Coaching in and Beyond Organizations production, a documentary that was made to fund social impact through coaching for women in Kenya. And this is my guest, James Cook, and you can reach James via james@in-yu.space. So feel free to reach out to us and leave your comments. Stay tuned, and until next time.